Afternoon, everyone. I'm going to discuss with you today a new EU project called WeCount, which has been up and running for about 10 months now. And the main aim of WeCount is to actually engage people with conversations around local transport. And in particular, we're trying to seek to engage young people in this citizen science initiative. As a methodology, I think citizen science has grown quite substantially in recent years. We're seeing it across a number of different scientific disciplines because it creates new knowledge, it helps policymakers, it gets people engaged in a conversation about specific issues. It also provides great spatial and indeed temporal data that can feed into various different research questions. But the methodology itself can be fraught with a number of difficulties. Things like quality assurance, the integrity of data. How do you balance the kind of representativity of different citizens within the project? How do you manage a large number of volunteers, keep them involved, keep them motivated? But what we have seen with citizen science is that it's becoming more and more popular in recent years across a range of disciplines, whether it's air pollution or transport counting or counting and identifying butterfly moths. There's an application for citizen science just about everywhere. And what's really interesting about the approach is that you can apply it in all these different areas and you can actually learn from each different project and each different discipline in terms of how you can implement the methodology to maximize the benefits and minimize any difficulties that you may have. So the WeCount project is using citizen science to basically start a conversation with the public. So basically, there are plenty of opinionated and sometimes even militant citizens already engaged in the conversation around urban mobility, but often the younger voice is not really heard in this area. So what WeCount is trying to do to work with local communities, not just young people, but all elements of community, to quantify local road transport, produce new knowledge about local mobility, and then to work with the communities to co-create solutions that have been informed by the evidence that we generated on urban mobility challenges. And this can be anything from air pollution to active travel, rat running, speeding, peak transport episodes. Really, the research question is devised by the citizen science community rather than imposed on them by ourselves. And we're doing this across 5 different pilots in 6 cities and regions: Leuven in Belgium, Madrid and Barcelona in Spain, Ljubljana in Slovenia, Dublin in Ireland, and Cardiff in Wales. And the reason we chose these cities is diversity. They've all got a range of different challenges. They've all got a range of different transport issues, different capacities, different air quality challenges. And by having these number of different cities, we can test the scientific robustness of our approach, but also its flexibility in different environments and different areas. So how does it work? Well, it's actually a relatively simple project. We're using a sensor called a telram. Telram in Dutch basically translates as abacus, but if you break it apart, tel and ram, it means window counter. And that's effectively what it is. It's a sensor that sits in an upstairs window with a clear view of the road, and then the sensor, via an algorithm in a Raspberry Pi, counts the number of cars, large vehicles, cyclists, and pedestrians that are going past your window, and can also assess car speeds in terms of the number of cars traveling at a particular speed. Now, while it is a camera connected to a Raspberry Pi, it's not actually taking any images. For privacy reasons, there is no image collected. It kind of works like a motion sensor in that it looks at a vehicle as it passes in front of the window, it looks at the shape of the vehicle, and then it makes a determination as to whether it's a car, a large vehicle, or indeed a cyclist or a pedestrian. Now, the WeCount project is working with local communities to establish these networks in neighbourhoods, and we're engaging with everyone from schools networks all the way to established communities, to employers, to areas that the local authority may already have of concern, such as air quality management areas in particular, around particular busy roads. And by generating this spatial and temporal data about transport, we can actually then start to facilitate local workshops, local discussions, to work with communities to utilize that data to create new knowledge on the problem that they've got, but also then to help these citizen scientists evolve from scientists into citizen advocates, so they can actually start to co-create and generate solutions that they can put in place while working with key stakeholders. The project itself is aiming for a minimum of 1,500 citizen scientists across our case studies. We're aiming for a 50-50 split in terms of gender, and at the moment our split is roughly 44% male and 56% female. We've also got an ambition to try and reach lower socioeconomic backgrounds, so that we make the technology and make these sort of projects more accessible to audiences that don't typically engage with this process. And indeed, we're also trying to engage with a range of different ages. Typically, citizen science projects can often be male, 40s to 50s, middle-aged, middle-incomed, and we're trying to break that mold and engage a much more diverse group and audiences in our different cities. So the project itself, in terms of an approach, phase one is obviously around recruitment, and then we get into a 5-stage process. The first 2 stages are really about bringing the communities together and actually work them to generate a common consensus in terms of what are the local transport problems that they want to address. How can the WeCount project actually address that problem, and then devise a citizen-led research, a suite of research questions. We then establish the sensor networks and start gathering the data and put these communities into action in terms of generating not only teleram data but also observational data about their local transport. We then bring that data together and facilitate analysis sessions where we start to understand what the data is telling us in more detail, and then discuss with the various stakeholders, not just the citizen groups, but also local consultants, local NGOs, the authorities, what actions they may want to implement and put in place. And finally, a reflection in terms of, did we achieve our goals, and thinking about the transferable lessons that we learned from the project, and also about understanding, have we given these communities the ability to sustain beyond the lifetime of the project, so there's a legacy going forward. So in terms of young people, it's an ambition of the project to try and engage more young people in its work. At the moment, the breakdown suggests that about 34% of the people participating come from, we say, the younger voices in our communities. But what has been noticeable is that the young voice is often very visible or very vocal when it comes to environmental issues, such as climate change or air pollution. And I think we see this through things like the youth strikes, we see this through Extinction Rebellion, and it's kind of the Greta Thunberg effect, if you like, in that we've got a very vocal voice when it comes to the impact. What we don't necessarily see is the same vocal young voice when we actually move upstream and think about the sources of these issues and the sources of these problems. So by engaging that young voice higher up in this problem pathway, we're hoping to get much better insights into how we might challenge or address these issues, such as transport. We're also finding that young people are really, really busy. They've got school, they've got lots of hobbies, they're spending time with their friends. So we have to be quite targeted in terms of how we recruit them and how we get them involved. And there are a number of different ways to do this. I mean, schools are obviously gateways to these young people, and these young people are obviously gateways to a number, or to their families and to their friends. But things like school clubs, so eco clubs, local initiatives like active travel initiatives or street school initiatives can be great ways to get in and to target and to recruit young people to these projects. We're also noticing that citizen science is actually giving young people a sense of independence. They are their own scientists. They're in charge of their own project. They're in charge of their own sensor, and that they feel like they're a much more independent voice within the project, and also that they have an equitable or an equal voice around the table when it comes to the co-creation of solutions. We're finding that they think it's important to understand, to engage with these projects from different motivations. Sometimes it can be from a learning or a STEM point of view. Sometimes it can be in terms of career development and skills development. Sometimes it's a sense of empowerment. And tapping into that motivation can be a really important way of getting people engaged. And finally, STEM is a great way of reaching out to young people and helping them get involved in these sort of initiatives. And the technical nature of the project in terms of the sensors and in terms of the data analysis, we're finding is often more appealing to younger people. So that's the WeCount project. As I mentioned, we've been up and running for 10 months. The case studies in Madrid, Barcelona and Leuven are pretty well established at this stage, and the case studies in Cardiff, Ljubljana and Dublin are gaining momentum day by day. Thank you very much.